Welcome to another episode of Strategy in Stereo. This podcast is about exploring a wide range of strategies for success and personal growth in both business and life. We cover topics like personal development, leadership, entrepreneurship, and growth mindset. Our life is a training ground for our personal growth. We are just athletes trying to find the secrets of the inner game of life. This show is hosted by Cruz Gamboa. That's me. Today's episode is Embodying Authenticity. My guest today is Ebony Wiley. So sit back and enjoy. And today we have a distinguished guest, Ebony Wiley. She's a longtime friend of mine, and she has a career in business development and project applications engineering, particularly within the oil and gas sector. She joined Solar in August of 2021 as a project applications engineer out of Houston. She was, prior to that, in General Electric for over 18 years. That's where we met. And an amazing lady, and she has so much experience in executive level business development, global applications engineer. And I invited her today to talk about authenticity because I think she's the embodiment of authenticity. So without further ado, I'm going to put you here on the show. Here we go.
Hey,
How are
Chris.
you?
Good. How are you?
Excellent.
Good.
How's your day? Are you excited?
Yeah, it's been good. It's a Monday. I was headed in traffic. Living in Houston, sometimes you have to center your mind on something that's not about the traffic and all the people trying to cut you off to get ahead. So it was a good commute. I was sharing with a friend today that I'm listening to a book by Brene Brown called Atlas of the Heart. Today's chapter, one of the chapters today, was about gratefulness, and it was really about the places you go when things are good. And what she does in Atlas of the Heart is she talks about behaviors and attitudes that are associated with emotions. And this particular snippet that I heard today was about gratefulness. And she went on to elaborate that when you live a life of gratitude, it changes your perspective on life because you can be grateful about the small things, right? You can be grateful about good health, grateful that you have a role or a particular job, grateful that you are able to exercise or have a family. So it was pretty interesting. And, at a time in my life where it's kind of mid-career, lots going on. We have teenagers in the house and little people going on. It's just a lot. And so just to live in a state of gratitude, even if it's for something small, kind of refocuses on anything else that can be deemed a bit crazy.
Absolutely. I mean, look, I found in my own life that gratitude is it's almost like, I mean, if you think about it in terms of chemistry, it's like a solvent, right? When
Mhm.
you have fear, when you have any negative emotion whatsoever, you bring gratitude into the mix. And then just all of a sudden things start to dissolve and they melt into love. And that's really what it's all about for me.
Mhm.
Just filling myself with gratitude also gives me courage because we all need it, right?
Yes.
We all have our own personal challenges that we grapple on every day, and when we are grateful, we just get a different perspective on life
I
and
agree.
about everything we have is just enough. It's exactly what we need
Yes.
to the place where we are at the moment, and just our journey is always evolving. So to the extent that we can continue to be grateful, it just makes it a much smoother ride, in my opinion. So
Yep.
I totally love that concept.
Yes.
But today I invited you because I personally think that you're an awesome lady. I mean, we've been friends for a long time, and every time I think about somebody who's authentic, I think about you. So how does that make you feel?
I appreciate that, Chris. It's so funny. I was actually in preparing for the interview when we first met in Buenos Aires, and I remember at that time I said something. There was a question asked, and I gave an answer, and I remember you kind of looking at me like, "Who is this lady? Like, who is she?" And how dare she almost? But I think that over time you have you became to appreciate that if I was saying it, it's because I knew it was possible, or if I was saying something that I wanted to make sure people were aware because I didn't want us to commit to something that we couldn't do. So just in the spirit of authenticity, I wanted to make sure we can deliver on our commitment. And so yeah, we have been friends a long time, and it's been fun. I mean, we have had some really exciting things, and then sometimes like, how are we going to get out of this, you know? So it's been fun.
Yeah, I remember. So I think you said something that that really caught my attention, which is authenticity. It's all about integrity. So when we have integrity with, who we are, what we stand for,
Hmm.
and what we want to accomplish, when we have that level of clarity, then we can just basically show up in the world, just being more confident and being more out there with what we believe, right? So that, to me, that's authenticity, just having the courage to just be who you are, no more nor less, but just exactly who you are. So what do you think about that?
No, I think that's so true. I think, it depends on kind of what you choose as your path, for people who are in, very structured settings, be it corporate America or be even in school. But, I can speak because being in corporate America for over 20 years, it's a very structured kind of, you have to be aligned or understand what the culture is of the organization that you're in. And so it's hard sometimes to be yourself without it coming across as maybe not in line with what either the leadership team wants or the company is used to, or honestly, frankly, what people are used to. And, for me, being a woman in a very technical field, and honestly being a black woman and being sometimes uh, even assumed as being a young woman in spaces now, um, people they think that I'm supposed to be a certain way, and you just I have always found it. I've been the same person since I was a kid. People who I grew up with, even I shared lockers with in kindergarten can pick up the phone right now and come on this program and say, "Oh yeah, she is X, Y, and Z," and you'll be like, "Yeah, exactly. I remember that." Or I see that all the time when I'm talking to her. So I think it's important. I talk to people a lot. Because I do public speaking and I have a podcast myself, and one of the things that I find myself talking a lot to audiences about, Cruz, is about not letting people put you in a box, right? If they see you, they go, "Oh, this person is an American, right? This person is a whatever gender, this person is whatever race, this person is assumed to be whatever age," and they make these assumptions and they go, "Oh, this person is a working mom, so she can't travel," right? So you have to kind of allow people or don't allow people to put you in a box, and so that you can define who you are. And the best way to do that is to express yourself in the most authentic way. And the challenge with that though is you have to learn how to communicate that where people can hear you. And I don't know if I shared this story with you. When I first started my career, I was working at General Electric in Erie, Pennsylvania, and I was on the shop floor. I was a manufacturing Six Sigma black belt out there with the union, doing my thing, doing equipment upgrades and quality improvement programs. And I'll never forget, I worked with a guy who was from Romania. His name was Ovidio. And
Ovidio.
Ovidio stopped me one day and he was like, "Ebony, your message." He said, "You got to learn how to be an iron fist and a velvet glove." He said, "Because when you start talking, what you're saying is right, but they can't hear you because you're like, boom, you're just going, going, going." He said, "So you got to learn how to communicate in such a way that they hear you." And so I bring that up because I think it's important that it's not that I have to slam my fist on the desk or say, "You know who I am," or "This is who I am." You just have to communicate in ways and take that opportunity when the doors open or when you think people will listen, to communicate so that people can hear you. And I think that is probably the biggest lesson that I've learned in my entire career. And in the spirit of being, and I know we're probably gonna say authenticity 100 times during this interview, but in the spirit of being authentic, I needed to hear that from him because I thought being authentic was being the way I would be outside of work, or, "Hey, I'm not gonna let anybody talk to me outside of work like that. That's not the same. So how can I get my message across, but also still be true to who I am?"
That's awesome. I think words really do matter,
Mhm.
the way you say things. Quite frankly, I was listening to your story and I was reminded that when I first started my career, I used to be overly direct as well. And I could come up across as being a little bit abrasive.
Yes.
because I was just being, I thought that I was being honest, but I was just being, I guess, overly honest. So it's really, it's all about shaping your message and saying it in a way that it's authentic, but it's also factual and it's neutral,
Yes.
and it's just really to the point that you're trying to solve. It's always about what it is that you're trying to say and how is it going to advance the problem that you're trying to solve. So
Exactly.
I hear you, but you know, I guess I'm speaking out of my own experience. There's always a defining moment that makes us who we are. I mean, because we, in effect, are the sum of all of our experiences, the beliefs that we adopt, either because we ourselves we come up with those beliefs, or we just get them from our parents or from our community or from school or from a teacher or from just an experience that we had in life.
Hmm.
So for Ebony Wiley, what is a defining moment that made you into this authentic person? And by the way, if we say 100 times authentic, we get more points.
You get more points. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, it's so interesting. A couple of things that I'm thinking of. I was actually just talking to so we have, my husband and I have three children, and one of them is a boy. He plays basketball. And I just told him and his friends this story yesterday. We were walking home from somewhere, and I said, when I was in high school, I was a freshman playing varsity basketball. So at that point, our junior high school was seventh grade through ninth grade cruise. So the ninth graders had to, if you were playing a sport, you had to walk to the high school. And I was playing varsity basketball as a ninth grader. And I remember going over, and the coach said to me, um, you belong here. And I was little, I'm pretty short, I'm 5 foot, and I've been the same height since, I don't know, 12 or so. And, or maybe a little older. But as a freshman, I was playing with these people that were 4 and 5 years older. So I had already started school a year early. So I was actually supposed to be in the eighth grade. So then I'm playing varsity with these kids that are, 4 to 5 years older than me. But I've I'm the oldest child. I'm like a natural, like do this leader. And so when I was up there and I'm about to play, no, I wouldn't say that I was intimidated. I didn't know them, and I didn't know the system of what he was trying to do. And he stopped me and said, "You're here for a reason. If you're going to be bossy to those girls that you play with you were playing with in the eighth grade, I need you to be the same person." And he gave me permission to be who I am. Once I was there for like a week, I knew what was going on. But what he was saying is, I wasn't the biggest scorer. Okay, I wasn't. I played great defense, and I could read the floor. And being a natural born leader, I wasn't afraid to be like, "Go here, you do this, right?" But he could tell that I was kind of like looking around, and he gave me permission. And from that moment, I played basketball from ninth grade all the way through 12th grade. But I'll never forget, I think I was in the 11th grade, and we were playing a team, and there was a girl that was a year younger than me, but she was really tall. So she was probably 6 foot. And so as a point guard, I would be bouncing the ball into her or trying to get her the ball, and she would always drop it. And I'll never forget this. My coach called a timeout, and he said, his name was Coach Evans, and he was like, "You need to throw the ball. She keeps dropping it." And me being me, I'm like, "That's her fault. She needs to catch the ball." And he said, "It's your responsibility, Ebony. If she doesn't catch that ball, you need to figure out a way to get it to her." And I was going through all of my options. Like, I bounced past her the ball, I lobbed it, and he was like, he didn't want to hear it, Cruz. He's like, "I don't care. You figure it out. It's on you." And so at that moment, I think, again, I probably was 15 or so. I was so angry. And my dad was at this particular game. And maybe I was older, but he was at the game, and my dad's like yelling at me on the floor. "Do I need to say something to him? Do I need to say something to him?" And I'm like ignoring my dad. And I'll never forget, after the game, my coach called me over, and he was like, "So what happened?" And I said, "Well, initially I thought you were blaming me for something, and it wasn't fair. But what I figured out is that if you had enough confidence in me, and you know that I could do it. And so it was my responsibility to get it there. And so what I did is I started like throwing the ball like at her chest, and she caught it. But it taught me that I had that sometimes you have to change your messaging, and that it's about not just being like, "Oh, forget her," or being like, it's just like figure it out. And so I'll never forget that. And I tell that story. Not I don't tell it a whole lot, but I tell it that sometimes that when you're younger and people see something in you and you're mad because you feel like they're forcing you to do something. When you look back at that, you're like, man, I was dumb. But even today, in my almost my mid 40s here, those same things that Coach Edmonds was teaching me, I still use and depend on that as well. And so I
Mhm.
really think that was a pivotal moment in my life where, you know, number one, it's okay. I know you doesn't matter. Anytime you show up, when I show up in places where I'm the only American or I'm the only person under 50 or I'm the only girl, only black person, I think about that time when I was a freshman playing varsity basketball and he gave me permission. He was like, I know you know what's going on, so speak up.
That's awesome. That's a great story, by the way.
Oh,
Have
thank
you told that story before? You told it very eloquently.
you. Well, thank
So I
you.
loved it.
Now I
Um,
couldn't stand him when I played for him though, Cruz. Like I used
yeah.
to be like mad, and I was complaining to my dad. That's why my dad was like, "Do I need to go over there and say something to him?" So I used to be mad about it. But every time I see him now, when I go back home, that's been almost 30 years, and I tell him all the time that I today I can say I appreciate it, but back then I did not whatsoever.
So can we go to a little bit more of a vulnerable place? So
Yeah,
are you Coach Evans to somebody today? Like how does that make you feel? What are you giving back when it
yeah,
comes to authenticity?
well, that's good. I am. It's funny. So I used to do some coaching. So we have kids who, all of three of our kids are pretty active in sports, and I've coached each one of them. So the oldest child, I coached her in volleyball. The middle, is a boy. I coached him in basketball, and then our little, I've coached her in volleyball and cheer. And so I am myself, no matter how old the kids are, no matter what the sport. And so I remember I was coaching our oldest child. Her name is Lauren in volleyball. In you've worked with me, so you know how I am. I'm like, do this, do this, do this, right? And I would be really tough on the kids, and the parents were complaining. So they would go to the owner and complain. She's so mean. Like, why is she talking to them? The girls are only 10. But I was also the coach that was out there running lines with them. I was also the one that was showing them the skill that I was telling them to do. And I think the parents just wanted me to have fun, and I just wouldn't do it. But on the flip side of that, we would get to tournaments and we would be playing girls a year or two older and we would win. And the parents from the other teams would come up and say, well, I wish my daughter played for you. So again, it's not my particular personality is not always liked and accepted, and it doesn't make people feel amazing, but it gets the job done. And so in every in all of the kids, like I said, basketball, volleyball, cheer, the same way. Actually, our youngest girl, they won a cheer competition. I think the first year I coached, and the other coach was like, they're so precise and they're so together. And the girls kind of looked at, because it was a group of moms that we partnered together to cheer. But I was like the disciplinary, like about the structure, about the things, and all the things that panned out for us to win. And so I kind of laugh at myself because I'm the same way. Even in my friend groups, they're like, she's gonna be the one. Like, just ask her. But I also, in my older age, so have Cruz, have learned that I don't always have to be in charge or the one. So there's a certain friend group that one of my other friends is like that, and I'm perfectly okay. But I think that comes with maturity, because years ago I had to be like the one that's making the decisions and the one that and so I don't need that. I have enough responsibility now. So if I find someone that can take it, I'm like, okay, you got it. No.
That's thank you for sharing that. I was also thinking about something you said about being authentic in the corporate environment. So, do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. I will say that it's not a popular road to take, right? So I think there's a couple of, I would call them enablers, in order to be authentic. You have to have people on your side. And so for me, I've had the lovely experience of having the same mentor or sponsor almost since I started my career. Like, I graduated from undergrad, started on the leadership program at General Electric. In my first rotation, I met the person who is still my sponsor today. Now he's retired, but even if now I can call him and he'll make some phone calls and I'll have a job offer in like 3 months, because that's just what he does. Um,
Is that Daryl?
yes,
Yeah,
Daryl, for sure.
no
Yes.
Daryl. Yeah,
Um, but I needed him or needed someone like that as a backstop, right? Because when you say things and when you say things that are against the grain, people start being like, oh, I don't know if that person fits, or I don't know, right? And you need somebody that'll stand behind you and say, no, no, I think what that person is saying is right, or hey, let's not discredit her because you disagree, right? So having that sponsor or that mentor that's in your space, in the realm that you do business in, that can really help when people start making you kind of arch enemy number one, when you're not saying yes to everything, is important. But also learning how, and I say this all the time, to kind of run a campaign so people understand what you're saying and how you say it. So there were times when, when you and I worked together, if we were preparing for a big deal call and I knew that I was going to have to say, well, no, we can't deliver, or hey, this price or this cost is going to be, what I would do is I would socialize that before the call. So I would
I
talk to you,
remember.
right?
Yeah,
I would
you
call you
you
and say,
call me
hey,
directly. Yeah,
yeah, right. Because I didn't want it to be a surprise. I didn't want them to interpret me saying something as me not supporting you and what you were trying to do. So that you would get on the phone and say, hey, Ebony, we talked about this before, right? Or I would say, hey, whomever the regional leader was, hey, I shot you a note on this, and if you don't recall, we talked about X. And what that does is that showing people that it's not us against me, or us against them. It's not that you don't get the broader picture, because that happens in corporate, right? When you're not saying yes to what people want you to say yes to, or agreeing to what the boss says, it is really hard to stand flat foot and be authentic when you know something is not, because you don't always get the call to go out to lunch, or people start kind of pushing you out. And I don't know if you recall, we were trying to do something. There was a product that we were trying to promote, and one of our leaders wanted us to make a commitment that was like over and above what we can do. And you and I were on the phone actually, and I said, hey, Cruz, we what the person is asking for at this time, I don't want to tell your customer that we can do it. What I think we should do is tell them what we know we can do, give us some time to figure it out, and then proceed forward. And when we got on the call, uh, the leader, who pretty senior leader, was like, this is what we're gonna do. We're gonna promise this, and it's gonna be 6 months. And I was like, so and so,
yeah,
hey,
yeah,
this is Ebony. And
yeah.
it's when I said this is Ebony, because people know me, I could imagine people were like, oh,
Oh,
you know, and not say no, like I had to give permission, but she's about to give us a version of the story that this
yeah.
person is not gonna like. But and if you notice what I did, I said the person's name, and I said, if you would, what are your thoughts if we approached it this way, right? Instead of just saying we can't do that, because we can't do that is can be seen as being disrespectful. It could be seen as not understanding authority and rank and file in corporate, which is very important. And it can be seen as you just not being a team player. And so I asked if he was open to consider a perspective, and then when the person kept going, I was like, hey, here's what we've historically been able to do, right? And I think the message still wasn't going. So then I had to go to like my real authentic self and say, I don't think this is possible, and here's why, right? But what I was kind of building up, right? I tried to, if you would listen to me, no, I tried another way. And then when they said, they were kind of pushing ahead, then I had to go to, based upon experience, it's not going to work, and blah 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 blah. All right, and I know it didn't feel amazing, but sometimes you got to get over that. Like, we're big boys and girls. This is a professional environment. I'm not telling you you're an idiot. What I'm telling you is that I believe that in being authentic and being deliver. If I'm going to tell my customer I can do something, then I want to be able to deliver, and not just have a great conversation. Everybody hangs up the phone, and then people are looking at each other like, how are we going to make this happen? So I don't know if you recall that at all.
I actually do. I know exactly the situation. It took me like 3 seconds, but I do remember that. And
Mhm.
yeah, and from the recollections I have from working with you, um, I never thought that you like really came across harsh, but eventually you always threw like a line. It's like, hey, look, here, this is where this is the limit of what we can do, and it is what it is. Can we probably do something better? We have to study it. I remember you were very factual like that when we working on deals together.
And you know what, Cruz? It was because it was for accountability, right? And so at that time when we were doing when we were working together, I had the responsibility of giving you a price and excuse me, a cost and a schedule to do what you were trying to sell. And so after we would agree on what was in scope, out of scope, and what we can do, then I went back and held my team accountable to deliver on those commitments. And so, there were times where people would be like, "Oh, you're so like, oh, black and white. This is what we're doing." And I would have to say to them, because if I leave the phone unclear or gray,
Yeah.
I'm going to go back to my team of people and say, "This is what we're doing," and they're going to ask me
Like
questions, and they're
what?
going to be like, "Well," and I can't hold them accountable
Yeah.
if we're kind of like a bit loose, right? And so
Yeah.
and again, it takes sometimes to be able to socialize that with people so they understand kind of where you're coming from versus you just not getting
Totally. I love that answer.
it.
I was thinking, one one issue that comes up in my mind when I think about authenticity is mental health.
Yeah.
I have some beliefs, based on some stuff that I've read, and even just from my observations, that a lot of the mental problems that people are facing today have some form of a root cause in their inability to really live a life that is aligned with who they are. Just which is another word for being authentic, right?
Mhm.
What do you think about that?
No, I think it's true. I think it has a couple of layers to it though, right? I think it's so we're talking a lot about corporate and just how you show up professionally, but on a personal note, right? If you can't speak up and really articulate what you like and what you don't like, which your preferences or how you feel, it kind of like steps you back. So if we're sitting up straight and we just kind of keep stepping back, eventually you're going to be kind of folded over. And I think that kind of happens professionally and personally and professionally. But if just to turn it back to corporate a little bit, it's funny because as you become a leader, sometimes it's hard to really be your authentic self, right? Because they want you to, as you go up in the ranks, and I had a mentor tell me this, as you go up in the ranks, your choices and thoughts and approaches are more and more in line with the company or the organization that you work in. And so I've actually taken the direct opposite, like even leading global teams, which I still do today, uh, leading people from all different ages, sizes, working for people who sometimes I don't agree with. I don't align with their integrity. I don't align with their beliefs. I don't align with their approaches. But I found a way to acknowledge, but still lead on my own terms. So, and I'll give you some examples. So I have, at this point, people on three different continents. I'm a firm believer. I don't need to know what you're doing at all times. However, I work for a guy or support a person that maybe have a different approach. And so it's in my younger days, I would go back and forth with that person about why do you think you need to control this? Why do you we should be able to trust? But I've gotten more mature. And so now what I do, Cruz, is I acknowledge, okay, I understand. But however, when I'm talking to the person that I work for, I am completely candid about if you need to, and I'll give you an example. If you need to take off time, if something comes up in your family, number one is family first. Because
Family first.
if
Yeah.
you're in this office and something's going on, you're not going to give your best version of yourself. You're going to be, resenting us and all the things. And so I'll give you an example. When you and I were working together, I had an employee who lived in France, and their spouse was having a heart issue.
I
And
remember
according
that.
to the
Yeah.
French laws, um, working laws, they were not supposed to work from home. And they were not, it was like all of these regulations. And so I was talking to my regular catch up, and they were telling me about some of the challenges that they were having. And I said, okay, this is what we're going to do. You're going to work from home. And if anybody tells you, I want you to tell them, I work for American. She doesn't know, take it up with her. And so the person did what they needed to do for their families. And what I did is I called a friend. He and I were both executives in Emmanuel Mercier, actually. And I called Emmanuel. I said, hey, Emmanuel, I need your help. Here's what I've done. And he's like, okay, let's figure out how we get it done without it being a big fuss, right? Again, I could have taken the party line and being like, this is what, per the laws, you're supposed to, or per the rules, you're supposed to do this. But again, being who I am as a person, I fully recognize how important it was for my team member to be present with their spouse. And funny enough, what ended up happening is the person got better, their health got better, and I was on a business trip over in France, and May 1st is a national holiday for them. Well, they didn't tell me that when I showed up, and so I come. The hotels were no others check in. There was no restaurants open, and so I was traveling with a guy named Darwin, and Darwin is he's one of my favorites. He said,
Darwin Vega.
"Yeah, Darwin Vega," and
Yeah.
he's like, "Well, let's just call this person." And so we called the person, and it was a national holiday. They were having a party at their house, and I said, "Well, I just wanted to get some advice um, of what we should do." Actually, Darwin was on the phone. And the person comes and picks us up, Cruz, brings us back to their house, invites us to a party. Now, mind you, I'm the only one who speaks only English, which is a whole nother thing. But there was like 3 or 4 different languages at the party. But their spouse was there. And the first thing the spouse said to me was what? I really appreciate you allowing my significant other to take care of me when I needed it. And oh, by the way, I would love to have you in my home.
That's
Language
awesome.
barrier was like I speak a little bit of French, so I was able to understand it. But you see what I'm saying? So that's an example of when you are like really like steadfast in who you are and are find ways to be authentic, and then kind of not ask permission, but figure it out. I think that's a really good example, and I'm really happy to say that the last time I checked with him, he was doing very well. And it was a really hard time though to have to go from being having a normal life to needing open heart surgery is a big deal. And sometimes I think corporations we get a little selfish, right? But at the end of the day, it's when you retire or you die, like they just replace you with another employee number and they keep it moving.
That's right. But as you were telling the story, I was just kept thinking that, in as much as we all understand, as executives, former executives of big corporations, I understand that you have to, stick to the party line, do all the things that you or play the game, basically, just to summarize it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, there's an element of humanity that takes place in here. And I know people try to say that, oh, this is just business.
Yeah.
And when honestly, that's one of those things. It's one of my pet peeves when people say it's just business, because business is about people,
Yes.
right? And
Yes.
if you don't understand that, the humanity of it all, then you're in the wrong business, right? Because we need teams to get things done.
Yep.
We need teams to build things. We need teams to sell things. We need teams to move things. And all of those are humans.
Yes.
There's emotions, there's feelings, there's everything that has to do with humanity around that concept. So it's never just about business,
That's right.
it's about humans.
That's
So
right.
I just think that I happen to think that my way of thinking about this problem is that business is about making profits, but also about providing a service, right? And then if we can understand that if we're providing a service, we're serving others, then really business is about just serving. And to serve, you need to have compassion. To serve, you need to have connection. And to serve, you need to be a great communicator too, right? Like we talked about. And to
Absolutely.
serve, you need to be authentic. You need
Yeah.
to be aligned with what you're doing. You need to be, mostly, you need to be authentic with yourself. Because if you hate your job, how can you serve anybody if you hate your job? If
That's
you
so
hate
true.
your boss, if you hate your company, you can't serve anybody like that. That's not a good energy to serve anybody.
No,
So
it's
that's just, I have a little slightly off way to think about this whole thing.
no, it's interesting you brought that up. It's so funny when you start having these kind of conversations, all the stories that you kind of, push back in your memory. We were doing a deal in Jakarta, Indonesia, and I'll never forget. It was a Thursday, and we were trying to decide, what are we gonna do? Like, we need to get over there. What are we gonna do? And so my manager said, and you remember him. He said, "Hey, let's have lunch on Friday." So it's Friday at noon, and he goes, "I think you and your team should go over there." Now, mind you, that means 6 people, and this is Friday at noon. And I'm like, "Well, I knew the meeting started on Monday morning Jakarta time, so Sunday morning our time." And he goes, "Well, yeah, you should be at the meeting." And I said, "In less than 48 hours." And
Yeah.
he said, "Yes." And I said, "Hey, you're going to stop telling me that I need to be on the other side of the world in less than 48 hours unless you want to meet my husband. And you've never met him before. So I think you need to, and it wasn't a threat. It was just like, listen, just, being completely honest with you,
Yeah.
this is all great. But at the end of the day, we all have lives
Yeah.
and we
Of
have
course.
things to do. And so, we get on the plane and we go to Jakarta. And to your point, if you think about Indonesia, when you talk about the amount of electricity and power is available, and all of the scattered islands that are out there. So we were doing a project for a government entity, and one of the things that when we showed up, the need, you could see the need, immediately of why we were there. And so we were in a discussion, in a negotiation, and kind of culturally talking about showing up as your true self. It was a room of 24 people, 12 from our company, 12 from the customer. And in the room of 24, there were two women, myself and my proposal manager, who is a stud. I mean, she's a rock star. She knew what she was doing. We would go, actually, we were in Argentina plenty of times together. And most of the big deals that I closed, she was there with me. And, or that we supported, she was there with me. And I'll never forget, we were in a discussion, and kind of culturally in Indonesia, they call the men, I think it's Bo. I think that's the right term. I might be messing up. But there's a term that they use that's really Mr. So, they would call you Mr. Cruz or Mr. Gamboa. But they kept saying, Bo is the woman. They kept saying just the term for a woman. No, Bach, or Pac Cruz, and Bo Ebony. But it was two women, and they kept saying Bo without a name. And so I never forget, I looked at the lady who was with me, and from a structural standpoint, she worked for me, but her and I were very much in tune, and she was highly skilled. So it wasn't about me telling her what to do, but more of us about aligning. And so I looked at her and I said, the next time he says Bo and doesn't use one of our names, don't respond, because it is extremely disrespectful that he knows everybody in this, everyone else. He can say Pop Robert, Pop this, So we need to set the standard that this behavior is unacceptable. And so he said, Bo, and we were looking down, trying to do some numbers, and I wouldn't look up. And he said it again. And I said, Ebony, and I repeated the person's name. Are you speaking to me, Ebony, or this person? And the whole room was
Today's
like,
episode is embodying
and he
authenticity.
said, Ebony. And I said, yes.
Yes.
Like, how can I help you? And so we were going back and forth, and about, not in a bad way, but kind of. And I'll never forget. He said, you people, you guys always want to come and charge all this money, and you want to do this and you want to do that. And so there was a bit of a language barrier, as you can imagine, and because they were speaking Bahasa to one another, and we had a guy in the room who could also speak Bahasa. So I went up to the whiteboard and I said, in order for you to meet your requirement, your PPA, what you need is this. And I drew a circle. And I said, but what you're asking me to do is a square. And so I drew a square. And I was like, they don't match, like graphically, right? And he looked at the drawing, he looked at the people, and he was like, ah,
Poemony.
exactly, right? And from that point, it was almost like a complete change, right? But it was extremely frustrating as well. And so we go through the negotiation, and as we're leaving, they're like, "Hey, when are you coming back? We want you to come back." And it was all after a day or so of all of this. And as we were about to sign the agreement on the scope, I told one of the guys that was with us, I said, "I want you to take a picture, because I need the evidence that we reached an agreement, and that it was a mutual agreement, and that it's so important to the people of Indonesia that this power becomes available. It's going to change people's lives." So we take the picture, we get on the plane, we come back to the US, and I get a call that said that we were rude,
Oh.
uncultural, I mean, all these things, and that they never agreed to anything.
Oh.
What did I come back with? I came back with a picture, and I was able to quote exactly what happened. But more importantly, the project went through, and they did a whole video cruise about how having power changed people's lives. They were able to have refrigerators, they were able to have access to lights, which means the kids can do, classwork or whatever they could learning. They can cook food. They can do all these things. And so if you think about it, right, the process of making it happen. I mean, it happened over a long time. It was a huge team from all over the world trying to make this happen. But in the spirit of what we had influence over, we could have said no, that we were unavailable to get on a plane the next day to go to Jakarta, or we could have allowed the disrespect. And I get it was cultural, but it was still disrespectful because we're an American based company providing a service to you. Or we could have gotten frustrated and said, no, we're just going to go home because we can't make this a win-win and we're done. Right. And so just kind of being, in the spirit of what we're talking about, I was extremely authentic with my manager. Like, hey, you're going to stop telling me at the last minute I need to go places because I don't think you want to meet my husband and I don't think you want to keep upsetting my family. Right. And then number two, right, you're going to be respectful. If you can say Mr. Cruz, you can also say Miss Ebony. And I am not being greedy, nor am I being malicious. I'm trying to help you come to terms with an agreement that's going to make an impact on the lives of so many people. And so, actually, when we received the video of the impact that it had on the lives of the people who lived on 8 different islands in that country, it made me tear up. And even today, sometimes I'll YouTube it and I'll Google it and I'll think about, kind of all of the 2 a.m. calls, some of the not so amazing conversations with colleagues, but really about this is what it takes. This is what we're accepting, and this is what we're not going to accept.
And this is why I invited you to this episode because as I said at the beginning, I think you have a lot to say about authenticity, and it's not easy being authentic in this world. I get that, but at the same time, if you actually think about it, when you think about a leader that embodies everything you love about a leader, they're authentic.
Yeah.
So being authentic is about just having the courage to be yourself, and just having people that are just not going to like the way that you are or what you say. That's a risk that you take.
Yes.
But we're always, every day, we're taking risks in life, right? I mean, life is a big risk. Let's start with that, right?
Yes.
But at the end of the day, what's important is what resonates with you, what makes you happy, and like where are you in your life with the way that you are showing up. So I just truly appreciate this conversation, Ebony, and I look forward to perhaps setting up another call in the future. So thank you so much, and look forward to our next podcast. Thank
Absolutely.
you.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.